Hello, I'm Adam Grimes, and welcome to Unit 4 in the first module of the Art and Science of Trading. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into charts today and think what is behind the charts, what actually makes up the patterns we see. So here's the problem, drinking from a fire hose. There's so much information in the market. The market is a more or less continuous flow of transactions. Depends, of course, how active the market is, but in many markets, we have multiple trades happening each second. And this can continue for many, many hours of each and every day. So there's a lot of things happening. And it really is these transactions, this continuous flow of transactions, that's the true language of the market. Sometimes we might associate that with volume. So you have a trade at a price and how much volume was done there. But the point is, it's too much information. A human could potentially look at a little bit of this information, but at some point, it becomes overload. And even if you were able to process this information, you're still only looking at the information that's happening right now. As soon as we go back historically and want to know what happened at some point days, weeks, years ago, this is not a great way. Just pulling up a list of numbers would not be a great way to understand the market. So we looked in the previous video about creating charts with bars and candles. And this is one of the most common solutions to this problem. It's probably not the only solution, but one of the things that I want you to realize, I told you I'm going to challenge you to think differently. And a lot of people, when they start trading, you just look at charts, you make decisions off of charts, right? No, take a step back. The chart you see is not the market. The chart is just a representation of the market, a model of the market. But do not make the mistake, please do not make the mistake of thinking the charts you see are the actual market. Every tick, every price change is information. And as I said, these price changes are the basic language of the market. They could be trades, meaning that a trade happened at a specific price. And I have here on the left, one of the ways to display this data. This is a few seconds of trading for a moderately active stock. And even more than the actual trades could be quotes. People change their orders. I mentioned the bid and the ask. You could certainly have cases where the bid or the ask price changes, but no trade happens. That also is information, which, by the way, is lost from charts. This raw information, we can't process this, so it might make sense to keep some kind of graphical record. Gee, I wish I'd thought of that. Now what you see is, I imagine this is 1 second or so of each trade, maybe several seconds, for a fairly active stock. And these charts are a few years old, so you'll notice the prices are different, but the concept holds. And each little forward step on the chart, which might be horizontal or it might be up or down, is a specific trade. And this is what we would call a one-tick chart, because each forward step on the horizontal axis is one tick, one trade. Now, it might make sense to put some of these together and to aggregate them. And so now on the left is each bar is 5 ticks wrapped together, and then 25 on the right. This is how we build bars up from these individual ticks in the market. It also might make sense to put time, rather than to have the horizontal axis be the number of ticks, the number of times the market moves, to have the horizontal axis represent a time interval. And this is a time bar. And here, each bar on the right is 1 minute of trading activity for the early morning of a stock. And there are a lot of different ways to do this. We just hit tick and time bars. You certainly could do bars that have a certain number of volume. So let's use a number, 1,000 shares every time, which would be very short for many stocks, but every time a certain number of transactions happen, if there's volume associated, we make a new bar. And this might be where some markets don't typically quote volume, so we might not know. Range would be another way that we have a market that moves enough up or down, changes prices enough that then we move to another bar. Momentum bars, point. There are a lot of different ways to make bars, but we're just going to keep it very simple. Now, stop and think. What is a bar? So, as I said before, it's not the market. It's a representation of the market. it is a visual tool to help us understand market data. That's the most important point from this entire video, that this is just a tool to help us understand the movement of the market. Aggregating data is good because it compresses data. As I said before, if we wanted to look at a list of price changes to know what happened a year ago, that would be very hard to do, but we can collapse that into days, into weeks, into months, even into a yearly bar maybe, and that lets us look for patterns, at least understand how the market moved. Of course, as we aggregate and put things together, the trade-off is we lose detail. If you were truly looking at that list of every possible transaction, you would pretty much know everything that happened. If we put together those transactions into bars, then we start to lose some detail. And an example of that is here. That so look at this bar on the left, which opened here and closed here. Now the question is, which of these scenarios happened? Scenario 1, opened near the low, traded lower, up to the high, closed higher. So this would be the price path inside of this bar. Is it number 2, which I won't guide you through each of these, or is it number 3, or is it some other possibility that we aren't even mentioning here? And the answer is we don't know. Could be any of these. There is no way to tell. Some of these are probably a lot more likely than the other. Number 3 is probably not very likely. Number 1's probably quite likely, but we don't really know. And that's just the loss of detail that we're stuck with. So I want to give a disclaimer here. We're going to talk about the story of the price bar. And just so you know, there's been a move over the last 10 years or so to do bar by bar analysis. And there are a lot of books and blogs and people that have focused on this. And some of these are absolutely stunning, frankly, because what these people typically do is they'll look at every nuance, every detail of the market, and they'll be able to come up with some explanation for everything that happened. This is very possible to do looking back. And in fact, if you've never done this, after you do a few days of this type of work, you too will be able to create these kinds of explanations. It's not that difficult to do looking back, but it's not possible to do it looking ahead. And I think the weight of evidence, and if your experience is different, please tell me, but I think that there's a lot of thinking and talking about this style of analyzing the market, but I don't think people have been able to apply these ideas very well in actual trading. Why? Well, go back to a previous video where I said the market was very random. Because the market's so competitive, you have a lot of people fighting things out. You have a lot of random fluctuations in the market that don't really mean anything. The core idea of the bar by bar school is that every single tick, every movement, every detail is meaningful. Every tiny, tiny fluctuation of the market is created by the intent of the people trading. And another outcome of this is that every time you make a trade, there has to be somebody willing to take the other side of your trade. Well, I'm pretty careful about what I'm going to say that I absolutely know, but one thing that I know is this is not true. Why is it not true? Simply because there is so much random noise and fluctuation in the market that not every detail can be important. In fact, I would say the vast majority of what we see is meaningless. That it's only a tiny, tiny, tiny subset of the information. I don't know, 1 piece out of 100 pieces of information that is meaningful. And maybe you could debate that. Maybe I'm off on that number, but at the very least, it is not possible. I don't see how it's possible to believe that every detail of the market is significant. The markets just don't work like that. Too competitive. There's no free lunch, right? So with that disclaimer in mind, we're going to do some bar-by-bar analysis here for a couple weeks, and I'm going to ask you to do quite a bit of bar-by-bar analysis and thinking for homework. Whether you are a new trader or an experienced trader, this is useful. And why are we going to do something that I just spent a few minutes debunking? Because doing this is going to force you to think. It's that simple. It's going to force you to look deeply into the patterns and charts, the patterns and markets, and to think about what intent might be there. even though this tiny detail work and focus is probably, maybe your experience will be different, but I don't think it's going to translate directly to your trading experience. I do think it will work toward building a deep understanding. I do think it will work toward building an intuition and an understanding of market dynamics. So the main reason for this disclaimer that I've just done is because you're going to see here as we start to go through things in the next video, you're going to see some incredible explanations. When you start doing this, you're going to make some incredible explanations, but don't be misled. It's probably much harder to translate this into actual thinking or into actual trading. This is simply a teaching tool. So the biggest point of this video, it was thinking about how bars form from the movements of market, of any market, how we slap many of those movements together and create price bars. And it's very important to realize that the price bars are only a representation of the market, not the market itself. Thank you very much.